He called me a secretary in front of the board, not his sister, not co-founder, not the woman who stayed up with Dad every night those last 6 months cataloging every customer account supplier ledger and unpaid invoice by hand. No, to Graham I was just the secretary. The board laughed politely, one of them even winked, and I smiled. That was a Tuesday. By Friday I was speaking to a lawyer. Not about revenge, at least not at first. I just wanted to know what my father's will actually said. Not what Graham claimed. Not what our mother, still numb with grief, barely muttered when I asked. Just the truth. I didn't expect what I found. I didn't expect the buried letter, or the addendum, or the clause that had been mistakenly overlooked. And I certainly didn't expect what followed: whispers about forged signatures. A pregnancy no one saw coming, and a betrayal so intimate, so blisteringly personal, it shattered everything I thought I understood about family. You want to know what happened. You want the truth, all right? But remember you asked, and I don't promise you'll like what you find. My name is Emily Brennan. I'm the oldest, the quiet one, the planner, the one who remembered the alarm code and picked up Mom's prescriptions and always showed up. Graham is younger by 2 years, charismatic, charming when it counts. The kind of man who could forget to pay the electric bill for 3 months, then sweet-talk the utility company into waiving the fees just by smiling through the phone. People liked Graham, especially Dad. Our family owned Brennan Hardware, a chain of 7 independent stores across the state. It was started by my grandfather, handed down to my father, and according to Dad's favorite Sunday brunch monologue, destined to become a legacy my children would build together. Together. Only Graham never stocked shelves, never rode in the back of the delivery van with me at 5 a.m. to fix a frozen irrigation system for the Carson farm. He never memorized our vendors' kids' names, never sat through 10 hours of union contract renegotiations. But he was there for the photo ops, the charity golf tournaments, the press release when we opened store number 6. Everyone assumed he was the face, the leader, the heir, and I let them, because part of me still believed what Dad used to say: Emily keeps the engine running. Graham shines the hood. Until Dad got sick. The cancer came like a thief in the middle of a family reunion. Stage 4. No warning, no mercy. By the time we realized how serious it was, he was already handing over his passwords. For 6 months, I watched Dad fade. And in those same 6 months, Graham took over more meetings, more dinners with suppliers, more strategy calls, just not with me. He froze me out so slowly, so skillfully, that it took me weeks to notice the silence. And even then I justified it. He's stressed. He's just trying to help. It's still ours. But the truth settled in the night after Dad's funeral. We were back at the house, half drunk on boxed wine and sadness, staring at the hearth Dad built with his own hands. Mom had gone to bed. The others had trickled out. And Graham, unprompted, just muttered, "You know he was going to leave it to me anyway." I laughed. A dry, ugly laugh. "To you, the business." He didn't flinch. "You're more operations, logistics. I'm the brand." I didn't sleep that night. And I should have known. Because when the lawyer read the will a week later, Graham didn't look surprised. But I did, because something was missing. And someone had taken steps to make sure of it. It wasn't Graham who crossed the first line. It was Owen. My brother's best friend since high school. The best man at his wedding. The CFO of Brennan Hardware, hired by Dad 3 years before the cancer. Smart, methodical, quiet in meetings, loud in numbers. The kind of man who could balance a budget blindfolded and still notice if someone missed a decimal point. And God help me, the only man who asked if I was okay after the will was read. I was sitting in my father's office, the one that used to smell like pipe smoke and Old Spice. The will had just been finalized. Graham's name was listed as the primary successor. Mine as operations consultant. I hadn't even known Dad changed it. Owen knocked once and stepped inside, closing the door behind him. I didn't know he said. I looked up from the desk, didn't know what. He didn't answer at first. Just studied me like he was calculating risk. That you weren't included. Not the way you should have been. I thought you were getting joint control. That's what your dad told me 6 months ago. Something flickered behind his eyes. Shame, maybe. Or guilt. I trusted him, I whispered. I think something changed, Owen said softly. And I don't think it was his decision. He took a step closer. And I knew somewhere deep in that part of a woman that pulses long before logic what was coming. I should have stopped it. But I didn't. Because when his hand found mine on the edge of the desk, it was warm. Familiar. A comfort I hadn't allowed myself to feel in months. And when he kissed me, slow and careful and full of things we weren't supposed to want, it wasn't passion. It was recognition. Years of repressed glances and near confessions, and late-night strategy calls that blurred the line between colleague and confidant. He kissed me like he already knew my secrets. And worse, I let him. That night I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the cracks in the ceiling I used to count when I was scared. My heart was racing, my mind quiet. Because for the first time since Dad died, I didn't feel alone. And that scared me more than anything. I told myself it didn't count, that we were grieving, that it was just a moment, a flicker of warmth in the cold ash of everything that used to be home. But when Owen touched my back in the hallway the next morning, I didn't flinch. When his fingers brushed mine in meetings, I didn't pull away. And when he lingered too long after everyone else had left, I didn't ask why. We didn't talk about it, but it kept happening. Always behind closed doors, always with restraint, the kind that made it worse. Like if we didn't say it out loud, we could pretend it wasn't real. But it was. And it wasn't just about the kisses. It was the way he looked at me when Graham boasted in front of the board. The way he tightened his jaw every time Graham referred to me as our legacy admin. It was the time I opened a folder Owen had left on my desk labeled "For Emily's Eyes Only" and found spreadsheets that didn't match the company's official reports. Numbers shifted, payments rerouted, consulting invoices with my name signed, dated never approved by me. I stared at them for an hour, then I confronted him. Owen didn't deny it. "I needed you to see it first," he said, "before anyone else. You're not crazy, Emily. Something is wrong. Something is being erased, and I think Graham is doing it piece by piece." I sat there silent. Then I asked the one question I'd been avoiding since the night he kissed me. "Why are you helping me?" He looked at me too long enough that I almost regretted asking. "Because I should have told you a long time ago," he said. "And because I know what it feels like to be invisible in a family that only sees what it wants." Later that night, I stood in the backyard barefoot in the grass, watching the kitchen light through the window. Mom sat at the table stirring a cup of tea she wouldn't drink, her eyes hollow, her shoulders caved in. She hadn't asked how the will reading went, hadn't even looked at me since Dad's funeral. And when I told her earlier that I might be thinking about leaving the company, she just said, "That's probably for the best." Like I was the liability. I wanted to scream. Instead, I went upstairs, opened my laptop, and reread the letter I'd found hidden in Dad's safe weeks before the funeral. A letter dated 3 months before his diagnosis. A letter that said, "Emily, if anything ever happens to me, you and Graham are equal owners, no matter what he says. I've filed the documents. Don't let him convince you otherwise." The letter wasn't notarized, but the signature was real. And now, with Owen's spreadsheets, I had proof that something foul was rotting under the surface. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt nauseous. Because now I wasn't just someone who had been cheated out of her legacy. I was someone who was sleeping with her brother's best friend and planning to sue her own family. 2 weeks later, I filed the paperwork. I didn't tell Mom. I didn't tell Graham. I didn't even tell Owen until after the attorney stamped the final page and slid the copies across the desk. The lawsuit wasn't just for control of the company. It was for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, forgery too, though that one would be harder to prove without turning everything into a public circus. But deep down I knew, so did Owen, and so I think did Graham. Because when I showed up to that board meeting with the subpoena in my hand, his smile faltered for the first time in years. The man who had called me a secretary in front of strangers now stared at me like I was a ghost. Or worse, his reflection. "We're family," he hissed after the meeting, grabbing my wrist outside the elevator. I stared at his hand, then at his face. "You made sure I wasn't," I said. "Not in the will, not in the business, not even in Mom's eyes." He didn't let go, not right away. His voice dropped. "You'll regret this, Em." There was something in the way he said it, something I couldn't name. A warning, a plea, or maybe just fear, because the truth had finally grown teeth, and I wasn't afraid to let it bite. That night I stood outside Owen's apartment and almost didn't knock, not because I didn't want to see him, but because I knew what this meant. We weren't just two people caught in a tangle of grief anymore. We were partners in a war. He opened the door. No words, just took one look at me and knew. And I stepped inside anyway. "I don't know what you think of me now. I don't blame you. This isn't the kind of story you tell at dinner parties. But it's real, it's mine. And it's far from over. Because the lawsuit, it was just the beginning. There's more, so much more. Like what I found hidden in Dad's old storage unit. Like the woman who called me from Colorado claiming she had a son, and that Graham was the father. And like the night I opened Mom's desk drawer and found the second will, the one dated after the first. The one that changed everything, again. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. I'd only gone to Mom's house to drop off a box of old pictures, back when I still believed we could rebuild whatever fragile thread was left between us. She wasn't home. The porch light was on. The back door was as always unlocked. I went in, placed the box by the coat rack, and saw the corner of a familiar legal envelope poking out from the drawer of Dad's roll-top desk. I shouldn't have touched it, but my name was on the front, just one word written in Dad's sharp handwriting, Emily. Inside was a single-page document, Last Will and Testament Revision 2, dated 3 weeks before his death. Unlike the official will Graham presented, this one was notarized, signed, stamped, and clear. In full possession of my mental faculties, I hereby designate my daughter Emily Brennan as co-owner and co-executor of Brennan Hardware, with full decision-making rights equal to those of my son, Graham Brennan. I read the paragraph 10 times. I flipped the envelope over and found a second note folded once, no envelope. If you're reading this, something went wrong. Ask Owen. He knew where this was kept. I felt cold. Owen knew. I confronted him that night. He didn't lie, didn't dodge. Just exhaled, sat down slowly, and said, I told your father to keep it out of the legal channels until he had a few more conversations with the board. He was trying to keep the peace, trying not to rattle Graham too soon. Then why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because he didn't want you to know until he was sure. And after he died, he looked down. I panicked. I thought maybe I could fix it from inside, protect you, but I was wrong. I stared at him. Did Graham know about the revision? Owen nodded slowly. He found out 2 days before the funeral. That meant Graham had already known the second will existed. When he presented the first one in front of Mom and the lawyer, he'd lied, not just by omission, by design. And Mom. Had she seen the second will too? Had she hidden it, ignored it? Or worse, helped bury it? I didn't know who to trust anymore. That night, Owen held me like I was fragile. But something had shifted between us, not the chemistry. That was still there, burning wrong, undeniable. It was the doubt, because now I had to wonder if Owen could keep this from me. What else had he buried? It started with a voicemail. Blocked number, static heavy. A woman's voice low and steady. Emily, I don't know if you know who I am, but I need to talk to you. It's about your brother. It's about Graham. Please, I'm not asking for anything, just the truth. She left a number, Colorado area code. I didn't call her right away. I let it sit in my inbox for 2 days like a ticking bomb I wasn't ready to detonate. But eventually, curiosity outran caution. Her name was Tessa Reilly. She used to work at our Denver location store number 3. She'd been hired 4 years ago as an assistant floor manager. Quiet, efficient, not the kind to stand out. Except to Graham. She told me they'd dated, secretly. At first it was flirty check-ins, late-night calls, hotel meetups under business trip pretenses. Then it became serious until Graham ghosted her without a word. 2 weeks later, she found out she was pregnant. She never told him. I didn't want anything from him, she said. But I thought you should know, because someone's been reaching out to me lately, asking questions, about Graham, about the baby, about you. My stomach dropped. Who? I asked. I don't know, just a man. He didn't give his name. But he knew things about your dad's will, about what Graham inherited. He said there's a trust involved, a clause that only kicks in if there's a paternity claim. I froze. I didn't know anything about a paternity clause. I'd never heard Dad mention it, and yet it made a kind of twisted sense. Dad had always been proud but paranoid. Trust to him had to be structured, written, protected. If he suspected Graham might have fathered a child out of wedlock, especially one born while he was supposed to be married, he might have tried to build a legal time bomb, one that would trigger a chain reaction inside the company if exposed. Tessa, I asked, my voice shaking, how old is your son? She paused. 4, his name is Max. 4. 4 years ago, Graham was still married to Elise. Still acting like the golden boy in front of Dad. Still pretending he was the future of the family name. I have proof, she said. Photos, letters, a DNA test if you want one. I didn't answer. I just told her I'd call her back. Then I sat on the floor of my hallway, trembling. Because if what she said was true, everything could shift again. Not just the business, the lawsuit, the estate, but the narrative. The family myth we'd all been raised on. The belief that Graham was flawed but still salvageable. If he had knowingly abandoned a child, If he had lied to the family, to the board, to our mother. If he had used the will to cover it all up, then this wasn't just a fight over inheritance. This was about moral rot. And I was holding the matchbook. It started with a name in the margins. I was reviewing old tax documents from the year Dad stepped back from day-to-day operations, the year Graham was shadowing him, and the year Owen was promoted to CFO. In the corner of a scanned expense log scribbled in Owen's handwriting was a name I hadn't heard in over a decade, Maggie Lorne. Maggie was my college roommate, and for one brief, confusing spring, my almost something. There were late nights, shared beds, kisses we both laughed about, later pretending they didn't mean what they obviously did. After graduation, she'd vanished, moved out west. No social media, no goodbyes. So why was Owen expensing flights under her name? Why were there recurring payments to a Lorne trust in Santa Fe masked as consulting fees? I asked Owen directly. He hesitated, too long. Then he said I didn't think it mattered anymore. What didn't matter, I snapped. He leaned back, hands over his face, before whispering, I met her before I met you. Years ago. At a financial ethics seminar in Phoenix. I didn't know she knew you until later. I just stared. She came to me after your dad got sick, he said. She was working at a compliance firm. Said she had concerns about internal tampering, something about the way Graham was diverting inventory and creating ghost vendors. So why didn't you tell me? My voice cracked. Because she begged me not to. She thought you were too close, that if you knew it would break you. He paused. She still asks about you, every year. I wanted to scream. Instead, I laughed cold, bitter. This entire time I thought I was unraveling the mystery, I said. Turns out I've been the last to know again. Owen looked like he wanted to say something else, but I walked out. And I didn't go back. Because here's the thing, no one warns you about betrayal. Sometimes it doesn't come with sirens and slammed doors. Sometimes it slips in through the cracks of withheld truths. And sometimes it's woven into the silence between people who say they love you, but choose what they think is best. For you. Without asking. That night I drove to Maggie's old address, the one we'd shared in Boston during senior year. The brownstone had new shutters, a different mailbox, but it still smelled like burnt coffee and rosemary in the air. I sat in the car for almost an hour. I never went to the door, but in that moment I realized something awful. The people I thought I could lean on, Mom, Graham, Owen, had all made choices about me without me. And the only thing more dangerous than being betrayed is realizing you were complicit in your own erasure. Mom always had a way of disappearing even when she was standing right in front of you. When Dad was alive, she was his shadow. Quiet, composed, always a half step behind him at Gallus board dinners, Sunday church. You could watch her and never quite see her. After his death, she simply stopped trying. No more Sunday calls, no more drop-ins at the store, and when I came by the house, she never met my eyes for long. I thought it was grief, but now I wasn't so sure. I found her that afternoon in the garden, crouched in her old straw hat, cutting dead blooms from the hydrangeas like nothing in the world was broken. Did you know? I asked. She didn't look up. Know what? I held up the will, the second one, the real one. Her clippers stopped midair. Emily, did you know? I asked again, louder now. Did you see this and ignore it? Did you help him bury it, or worse, did you give it to Graham? Her eyes finally met mine, and what I saw there wasn't guilt. It was resignation. I did what your father asked. No, you didn't. He asked me to take over with Graham. You helped him steal it. You let him cut me out. She stood slowly, brushing the dirt from her gloves. Your father changed his mind, Emily. You just didn't want to believe it. He said Graham had potential, that you'd always be the strong one, the one who didn't need recognition. That word need made something in me snap. I didn't need credit. I needed to matter, and you let him erase me. And then you watched while he handed everything to your son like I was a ghost in my own bloodline. Her face didn't flinch, not even when I said your son, like I wasn't hers too. And that's when it hit me. The ache I'd carried my whole life, the feeling of being tolerated, not chosen. She always wanted a boy first, Dad used to say with a chuckle. But we got Emily instead. And thank God we needed a soldier before we got a prince. I was the placeholder, the prologue. You never loved me the way you loved him, I whispered. She tilted her head. I loved you the only way I knew how. I wanted to spit that sentence back in her face, but I didn't. I just walked away. And as I reached the driveway, she called out so softly I almost missed it. You were never the mistake, Emily, just the one who didn't make it easy. I didn't turn around, because she wasn't crying, and neither was I. But something had died between us. Something final. And I knew then this war wasn't just about money, or power, or legacy. It was about acknowledgement, about every woman who's ever been asked to serve quietly while her brother, husband, or son is handed the throne. But not this time. I was going to finish what Dad started, whether they liked it or not, even if it meant dragging my whole family through the fire to do it. The quarterly board meeting was already underway when I opened the door. 12 men and women in crisp suits, Graham at the head like a smug king talking about expansion projections and customer retention. I didn't knock. I didn't wait to be introduced. I just walked straight to the center of the room and dropped the envelope on the polished mahogany table. Graham's voice faltered mid-sentence. "What is this?" he asked, eyes narrowed. "Evidence," I said flatly. "The real will. Signed, notarized, stamped, along with documents showing adjusted inventory values from store number 3, irregular contractor payouts, and hidden trust disbursements made under false pretenses." Murmurs broke out like wildfire. "I'd like to formally call for an emergency board review of Graham Brennan's executive conduct," I continued. Effective immediately. The room fell into a strange, dense silence. Graham stood slowly. "You don't have the authority to—" "Actually," said Mr. Callahan, the longest-serving board member, flipping through the papers. "If this version of the will holds up, she does." Graham's face drained of color. "I don't know what you think you're doing, Em, but this is reckless. You're attacking your own family. You stopped being family the moment you forged Dad's intent and buried my name to protect your crown," I said. His jaw tightened. "You don't want to go down this road." "I'm already on it," I replied, "and I'm not walking it alone." Owen entered then quietly and handed out printed spreadsheets, each one marked with red-circled discrepancies. It was all there: months of data manipulation, masked payments, phantom vendors, including those made during a period when Graham was supposedly on sabbatical after the divorce. "This is slander," Graham barked. "And if you think I'm going to just step down—" "I don't want you to step down," I cut in. "I want the board to vote." There was power in that pause, a flicker of justice, of reckoning. They scheduled an emergency ethics session for the following week. And for once, Graham didn't get the last word. Later, outside, Owen caught up to me. "You were incredible," he said. But I didn't feel incredible. I felt hollow. Because standing in that room, proving my worth with receipts and signatures and hard evidence, what I wanted more than anything wasn't applause or authority. It was for anyone to say, "You should have never had to fight this hard." But they didn't. So I drove home alone. And when I got there was a package waiting for me on the porch. No return address. Inside was a photo. Graham, Tessa, a baby in her arms, and written in red ink on the back, "Ask your brother about what happened in Santa Fe and why he paid for her silence." I booked the flight without telling anyone. Not Owen, not the lawyer, not even Tessa. Santa Fe wasn't on any official business ledger. Yet Graham had traveled there 6 times in 2 years, each trip listed under supplier relationship development. We had no suppliers in New Mexico. What we did have, according to old emails I'd dug out of Owen's server, was a woman named Isabel Dunn, former paralegal, and the notary who signed the second will. I found her through a nursing home directory. She was in palliative care, stage 4, COPD, wheezing through every sentence but lucid, sharp, and angry. She remembered my father. Kind man. Careful. Made me notarize every single signature twice. Said it was his insurance against a son who liked shortcuts. She coughed hard, then motioned for the man beside her, her nephew, to leave the room. When he was gone, she leaned in and said, "Your brother came back here after your father died. Told me the family had settled. Said you were unstable. Wanted me to retract the notarization. I refused." I sat in stunned silence. She reached for a worn folder beneath her bed and handed it to me. Inside, a copy of the second will, her original notary seal, and a signed affidavit dated 3 days after Dad's death. "He sent someone," she whispered. "Not Graham. Someone else. Tried to bribe me. When I said no, things got worse. My car was slashed, my apartment broken into. I moved here under my nephew's name to stay safe." I swallowed hard. "What do you mean, someone else?" She stared at me. "I mean someone who worked for your mother." The words hit like a slap. "My mother—" "I thought she was grieving detached," I said. Isabel nodded slowly. "Maybe. But grief doesn't stop people from protecting their favorites." I left that facility, shaken, the folder clutched to my chest like a life raft. Back at the hotel, I called Owen. "I need to ask you something," I said. "Anything. If Mom knew about the second will and she let Graham fake the first one, what happens to her stake in the business if we prove intentional fraud?" Owen hesitated. "If she was complicit," he said, "she could lose everything." There was a pause, then quieter. "Are you ready for that?" I didn't answer. Because the truth was, no, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to unravel my own mother. But the truth had grown teeth and blood. And now it was biting back. She was waiting for me when I got home. Mom sat at the kitchen table perfectly composed as if she'd been expecting me. No tea, no book, just her hands folded neatly, a single manila folder beside her, like a quiet warning. "I suppose you went to Santa Fe," she said before I even took off my coat. I didn't respond. I just pulled out the envelope Isabel had given me and placed it on the table beside hers. We sat there for a long time, the two women of this family, mother and daughter, blood and betrayal, staring across the battlefield of wood grain and paperwork. "I gave your father everything," she said finally. "I gave him 2 children, his house, his business." And still, he doubted Graham. Said he wasn't ready. Said you were more prepared. I blinked, because I was. She nodded slowly. "Yes, but it wasn't supposed to be you." That sentence was a knife. Not a slip of the tongue, not said in anger, said plainly, deliberately. "It was always supposed to be Graham," she repeated. "He was the one who carried the Brennan name." "You," she hesitated, "you were the helper, the strong one. But he was the legacy." I couldn't breathe. "I found the second will after your father died," she continued. "I read it, and I made a choice." "You mean you hid it?" "No," she said. I corrected a mistake. She opened her folder and pulled out a printed email thread between her and the family attorney, dated the week after Dad's funeral. In it, she'd requested a clarification of the final will, citing emotional duress and conflicting versions. She'd used her power of executor to delay submission, to bury it. "You falsified probate," I said, voice shaking. "You lied to the court." "I protected the company," she said flatly. "I protected our name." "No," I whispered. "You protected your favorite." She stood then, walking slowly to the window. Her voice was quiet, almost tender. "You were never meant to fight for scraps, Emily. But that's what strong girls do, don't they? They fight, they claw. And when they win, they wonder why it still hurts." I didn't move, couldn't. She turned back toward me, her face unreadable. "I didn't want it to come to this. But if you push this lawsuit forward, if you expose this version of the will..." She paused. "You won't just destroy Graham. You'll destroy me." And there it was. The final card, not a plea, a threat wrapped in maternal sorrow. I stared at her like she was a stranger. Because maybe she always had been. "Then I guess we both burn," I said, standing slowly. She didn't stop me as I walked out the door. Didn't call my name, didn't beg. Because she knew I wouldn't stop now. And because deep down, I think she believed she'd already won. But she hadn't. Not yet. The hearing was packed. Graham sat stiffly beside his attorney, jaw clenched, that same performance smile he'd worn since we were kids, like charm could erase a paper trail. Mom sat 3 rows behind him, draped in a pearl gray shawl, her expression unreadable. Not quite ashamed, not quite proud, just calculating. I sat with my counsel folder on my lap, the second will inside. My heart was pounding, but not because of what I was about to say. It was because of the final witness listed on our side. My lawyer had kept it secret, said it was better that way, cleaner. "Let the shock work for you," he'd said. "This one changes everything." The judge called a brief recess. When court resumed, the bailiff opened the side door. And in walked Elise, Graham's ex-wife, wearing a long black coat, a scarf wrapped around her neck, her blonde hair pulled tight. He went pale. For the first time since this all began, he looked afraid. She was sworn in, then sat down, calm, her voice steady. "My name is Elise Brennan," she said, "former spouse of Graham Brennan, and I'm here under subpoena to provide material testimony on a confidential settlement reached in 2021 involving a non-disclosure agreement." I blinked. What?" The attorney asked gently, "Can you tell us why this NDA was signed?" She took a breath. "Because Graham paid me $500,000 to stay quiet about his affair and the child he fathered during our marriage." The courtroom gasped. Elise looked directly at Graham, then her eyes sharp. "I wasn't going to come. I wanted to stay gone. But he crossed a line when he lied to the court. When he said he had no children outside of our marriage, that he never had a will altered, that he didn't forge signatures. And when I saw the name Tessa Riley in the subpoena packet, I knew." She handed over a sealed manila envelope. Inside photos, bank statements, a paternity test. All dated, all damning. The judge called for silence. Graham slumped forward, his hand covering his face. Elise looked like a woman set free. And I couldn't feel anything. No triumph, no rage, just a hollow kind of knowing. Like I had finally exhumed the full rot of our family tree. Elise stepped down and passed by me. She paused only for a second and whispered, "He never thought you'd come this far." Then she was gone. And I finally breathed. The judge turned toward the board members who sat silently in the gallery. I believe this matter warrants immediate reevaluation of succession, she said, and formal charges may follow. The gavel came down. And just like that, Graham Brennan was undone. But so was everything we once called family. 2 days after the ruling, the board sent me a formal letter. Unanimous vote, full control, CEO, co-owner, legacy restorer. The empire I'd been denied not just inherited now, but handed back like a stolen crown finally returned. And for a moment, I almost said no. Not because I didn't want it, I did. But because what was left no longer resembled the business my father had built. The people were broken, the staff weary, the family fractured beyond polite repair. The empire was mine, but the family, ashes. Owen showed up the next morning, quiet holding coffee and that look he wore when he wasn't sure if he'd already lost me. I didn't know about the NDA, he said. I nodded. I believed him. And still, something between us had shifted since Santa Fe. You protected too many people for too long, I said, even me. He didn't argue. I thought I was doing the right thing, he said. You were doing the safe thing, I replied, and that's not the same. We sat in silence. The wind rattled the windows. Somewhere a neighbor's dog barked. Then he asked the question I didn't expect. What will you do, Wick, with the company? I stared at the folder in my lap. My name on every page now. Signed, sealed, ironclad. I'll restructure, clean house, audit every store, promote the women in ops who've been invisible for years, and rename the scholarship Dad started after me. Owen nodded, quiet pride softening the tension between us. And Graham, he asked. I looked out the window. Let the court deal with him. I've spent enough of my life trying to fix what he broke. Owen stood then, and us. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because the truth was, I didn't know. We had shared grief, war, strategy, secrets. But love, that required a kind of peace I wasn't sure I could feel yet. Still, before he left, I placed my hand on his. And for the first time in weeks, he didn't flinch. That night, I walked through store Nar 1, the original, the one with the leaky skylight and the old vending machine that still took quarters. The staff was gone, the lights dim. But I stood in the middle of the showroom alone and whispered, I'm here, Dad. I'm still here. Not for him. Not for Graham. For me. And maybe, just maybe, for the version of the Brennan name I was finally strong enough to redefine. They called me the secretary, the background noise, the invisible sister. I lived in the shadow of Graham's charm, Mom's silence, and Dad's fading faith. But I was never invisible. I was just unseen. Until the day I chose to be seen, to be heard, to take back what was rightfully mine. This isn't a story about winning a lawsuit, or taking a company, or proving someone wrong. It's about breaking a legacy of silence, of women who keep their mouths shut so their brothers can shine, of mothers who protect sons over daughters, of secrets that rot families from the inside out. I'm not proud of everything I did. The affair with Owen, if you want to call it that, was messy and wrong and confusing. But it was the only thing real in a world built on lies. I'm not perfect, I made mistakes, but I'm honest. And after everything, after the betrayals, the heartbreak, the courtroom battles, and the scars, I'm free. Free to build something new, something stronger, something mine. Graham, he's facing his reckoning. Mom, she's silent now. And Owen, we're figuring it out one day at a time. But me, I'm just beginning. Because sometimes the hardest battles bring the greatest gifts. And sometimes being forgotten is the clearest path to becoming unforgettable. Thank you for listening to my story. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this, it's this. Don't let anyone else write your legacy. Write it yourself, because no one else can.